Power corrupts, but absolute power creates monsters. In the blood-soaked arena of ancient Rome, one man believed himself to be both emperor and god, gladiator and deity. His name was Commodus, and his reign would transform the greatest empire in history into a theater of madness. Citizens were forced to worship a megalomaniac who dressed as Hercules, while Rome trembled under the weight of his delusions. This is the story of how the son of a philosopher became the most despised ruler in Roman history, and how his descent into madness led him to a violent death in his own bathtub. His tale is not merely one of political failure, but of psychological collapse, a cautionary reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. The philosopher emperor's fatal mistake in the 2nd century AD. Rome stood at the pinnacle of its power. The empire stretched from Britain to the Euphrates, from the Rhine to the Sahara Desert. Trade routes connected distant lands. Roman law unified diverse peoples, and legions maintained the Pax, Romana. At the heart of this golden age were the 5 good emperors: Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus, Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Each had been chosen not by bloodline, but for merit, adopted as heirs to ensure stability. This system gave Rome nearly a century of prosperity, but Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor whose meditations would echo through millennia, made one catastrophic decision. He broke tradition and named his biological son, Commodus, as heir, born in 161 AD, into unimaginable privilege. Lucius Aurelius Commodus was destined to rule over 50 million subjects across 3 continents. Yet from his earliest years, the boy displayed little of his father's wisdom, while Marcus pondered the meaning of virtue. Commodus was captivated by displays of violence and personal indulgence. Childhood in the shadow of war. Much of Commodus' childhood was spent alongside his father on the northern frontier. Marcus Aurelius fought brutal wars against Germanic tribes, known as the Marcomannic Wars, and the young prince witnessed firsthand the blood and chaos of battle. Historians suggest these experiences left a permanent mark. Where Marcus sought meaning in suffering, Commodus saw only the intoxicating thrill of dominance. His fascination with gladiators, blood, and the spectacle of violence would define his reign. The philosopher's death. The tyrant's birth in 180 AD. Marcus Aurelius died during a campaign along the Danube. His 18-year-old son inherited the throne. At first, Rome hoped Commodus might continue his father's legacy, combining wisdom with strength, but those hopes quickly evaporated. His first act as sole emperor was telling. Instead of completing his father's campaign against the Germanic tribes of victory that would have secured the empire's northern frontier, he signed a quick peace treaty and rushed back to Rome. Soldiers welcomed the respite, but Rome's security was undermined. The frontier would erupt again under later emperors, a burden created by Commodus' haste. Rome under a new god unlike his predecessors. Commodus abandoned even the pretense of republican tradition. He dismissed experienced advisors, ignored the Senate, and surrounded himself with flatterers who fed his growing megalomania. Where earlier emperors maintained a delicate balance between Senate, people, and army, Commodus recognized only one principle: himself. His paranoia deepened. He demanded divine titles, elaborate rituals of worship, and blind obedience. Senators who had served faithfully under Marcus Aurelius were accused of treason and executed. For Commodus, Rome was no longer an empirate, was a stage for his fantasies, commodus, and the gladiatorial obsession. The emperor's defining passion was the arena. Unlike past emperors, who sponsored games as acts of public generosity, Commodus believed the Colosseum was his rightful domain. He insisted on fighting as a gladiator, but these contests were grotesque parodies of combat. Commodus' opponents were usually disabled soldiers, prisoners with wooden weapons, or wild animals drugged into weakness. The emperor entered with real arms, cutting down helpless victims while proclaiming himself a new Hercules. He fought hundreds of times, demanding audiences treat him as invincible. Coins depicted him wearing a lion skin and wielding Hercules' club. Rome's greatest architectural symbol of imperial dignity became his personal playground of blood. The financial toll was staggering. Commodus demanded exotic beasts, tigers from India, elephants from Africa, bears from Germany imported at enormous cost. When advisors warned of bankruptcy, they found themselves scheduled for execution, sometimes in the very arena where the emperor played at being a god. Rewriting Rome in his image, Commodus. Delusions escalated. He renamed the months of the year after his titles. September became Commodus, October Invictus, November Exuberant, December Amazonius. He even renamed Rome itself, Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. The Senate was forced to declare him the founder of a new golden age. Festivals across the empire were refashioned to worship him as a living god, erasing traditions centuries old. The empire that had once deified emperors only after death now bowed before one who declared himself divine while still alive. The empire in fear as Commodus' megalomania grew. So did his paranoia. He saw plots everywhere, among senators, generals, even his family. Spies and informants infiltrated every level of Roman society. Slaves betrayed masters, soldiers reported officers, wives denounced husbands. Execution became his favorite tool of rule. Senators were forced into the arena, wealthy citizens stripped of property, commanders disgraced and killed. Rome's economy withered under confiscations and fear. Trade declined, wealth evaporated, and trust in imperial government collapsed. The philosopher's son had become Rome's nightmare, a ruler who worshipped himself and destroyed anyone who hesitated to worship him too. By 198, after a decade of Commodus madness, even his closest allies recognized the empire could not survive him. The Praetorian prefect Letus, the chamberlain Eclectus, and the emperor's favorite concubine Marcia conspired to end his reign. Conspiracy in the palace siege had their reasons. Letus, once Commodus' loyal protector, realized he would eventually be executed like so many before him. Eclectus, who managed palace affairs, had watched colleagues vanish into dungeons. Marcia, long able to temper Commodus' excesses, learned that her own name was on one of his death lists. The emperor's plan for the new year pushed them to act. On January 1st, 193 AD, Commodus intended to appear in the Senate, dressed not in imperial robes but as a gladiator, an unthinkable humiliation for Rome's governing body. He even planned to abandon the palace and rule permanently from the gladiator barracks. For Rome's elite, this was the final outrage. Poison in the cup. On the night of December 31st, 192 AD, the conspirators struck. Marcia laced Commodus' wine with poison during dinner. The emperor drank, grew ill, and was persuaded to take a bath to ease his discomfort. But fate turned against them. Commodus vomited, expelling much of the poison. His suspicions flared. He demanded his guards investigate, his paranoia now confirmed. The conspirators had to act swiftly. The wrestler assassin Letus summoned Narcissus, a wrestler and gladiator trainer secretly loyal to the plot. As Commodus soaked in his bath, Narcissus entered. The emperor realized too late. His cries for help were drowned by the running water. The wrestler's powerful arms closed around his throat, forcing him beneath the bath's surface. The struggle was desperate, but brief. The man who believed himself a god drowned like any mortal, gasping for air as human hands squeezed the life from him. The Emperor of Rome died strangled in his bathtub. On the last day of 192 AD, the aftermath had dawned. The conspirators declared Pertinax, an elderly senator and respected general, as emperor. The Senate denounced Commodus' memory, erasing his name from monuments, melting down his statues, and restoring Rome's traditional identity. The months renamed after him returned to their original titles, and Colonia Comediana was once again simply Rome. But Commodus' legacy could not be undone so easily. The treasury was empty, the military demoralized, and the Senate terrified into weakness. Pertinax ruled only 87 days before being murdered by Praetorian guards eager for bribes. What followed was the Year of the Five Emperors, a civil war that plunged Rome into chaos. The Praetorians auctioned the throne to the highest bidder, armies marched on Rome, and the empire teetered on collapse. Only with Septimius Severus did order return. But Commodus had set a precedent that could never be erased. Emperors were mortal, vulnerable, and often dangerous. The legacy of Madness Commodus' reign remains one of history's starkest warnings. The empire that had thrived under wise rulers nearly shattered under the weight of one man's delusions. His obsession with godhood exposed the fragility of Rome's institutions. His paranoia destroyed trust, his extravagance bankrupted the treasury, and his gladiatorial fantasies degraded the dignity of the imperial office. He believed himself Hercules reborn, Jupiter incarnate a living god, but he died like any mortal, murdered by those closest to him. His divine pretensions dissolved in bathwater and blood. A cautionary tale. Commodus' story is not of noble ideals, but of raw survival. His assassins were not heroes seeking to restore the republic, they were desperate people trying to save themselves from his madness. And yet, their act resonates through history as proof of how fragile civilization becomes under tyranny. Rome never fully recovered from his reign. The cracks he created widened into the crises of the 3rd century, when emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed, and the empire began its long decline. Today, Commodus is remembered not as a god or hero, but as a warning. His name has become synonymous with cruelty, megalomania, and the dangers of unchecked rule. The son of a philosopher had every chance to continue Rome's golden age. Instead, he became the mad emperor who thought himself divine, lonely to die strangled, powerless and alone. His story remains a brutal truth. No matter how much power one claims, no man can escape the final democracy of death.